Hello and welcome to day one of the National Ploughing Championships here at Ratheniska in County Laois. I'm here at the Agriland Pavilion. It's stand 289. It's right in Hello and welcome to day one of the National Ploughing Championships here at Ratheniska in County Laois. I'm here at the Agriland Pavilion. It's stand 289. It's right in the heart of the ploughing site, so do pop into us and say hello if you're passing. We're about to start our live stream where we'll have a panel discussion with farm leaders. We'll have the Minister for Agriculture here in the tent with us. We'll have a live podcast on farm finance. We have a competition to win the use of a Merlot telehandler. So please do call to us and stick with us until 3 p.m. I'm going to dash right back into the tent again now for a live panel discussion. And I'm back in the tent here today. Just ran in from the gorgeous sunshine outside, and I'm joined today by our farm leaders, Francie Gorman from the IFA, Dennis Drennan from the ICMSA, and of course Sean McNamara from the ICSA. Thank you for joining us today, and I know you're under pressure to be elsewhere. It's a busy day, the first day of the ploughing free, but Francie, I might go to you first. We're here at the ploughing today, which is traditionally known as a place to press the flesh, as they say, and never has that been more pertinent now than the budget just around the corner and a general election, some might say in weeks, but certainly within the next few months. So what are you expecting from Budget 2025, for example, Francie, for farmers?
What I'm hoping for farmers, number one, is that the zoned residential land tax will be sorted. We've been promised this for a couple of years now since it came in. The idea that farmers are going to be asked to de-zone their land to get out of it is not good enough. There needs to be a carve-out, and anybody that's genuinely farming their land have to be exempted. We're looking for supports for the vulnerable sectors. Look, the tillage sector is hugely challenged, the beef and sheep sector, and in general the cost of doing business. And our chief economist, Ty Buckley, has done an analysis and a piece around that to coincide with the ploughing match. It shows costs on farm up 73% over the last 6 years, incomes down 34%. And if you look at the dairy sector, where there's been huge investment, cost of doing business and regulation in that sector is crippled at the moment, and they're the issues that need to be addressed for me in the short term.
Dennis Drennan then from the ICMSA. It has been a challenging year for all farmers, but dairy farmers in particular this year seem to be struggling under the weight of environmental targets. Now there's a European Commission delegation in Ireland at the moment to review everything in relation to our nitrates and water quality and so on. And is there any optimism among dairy farmers at the moment that they will be able to retain the current nitrates derogation we have?
Well, I think it's a huge challenge, but I think it's a challenge that has been met head on by farmers. I think when you look at the likes of the ASAP programme and the engagement that's there, even though it's a voluntary programme, the carrying out of actions that have been agreed with the Law Pro and the ASAP advisors, that's hugely positive. The new EIP with 65 million to carry out some of those actions, that was a stumbling block. Finance was obviously some stumbling block with carrying out some of those measures. So, you know, the amount of enforcement, I suppose, and the amount of adherence to policies and to new water regulations to protect the water quality in the country, I think farmers are really embracing that now and realise that, you know, okay, we've a phenomenal industry in the country of producing milk and meat, and we're probably the most sustainable in the world at doing that, but we have to do it in that little bit better way, and everybody seems to be with their shoulder to the wheel to make sure that we see an improvement in water quality and we secure the derogation, because we have a 17 billion euro indigenous industry in the country with a multiplier effect that's putting over 40 billion into the rural economy. So we can't even imagine if that indigenous industry is affected. You know, so we have to make sure rural Ireland will die a death without that money being injected into it. Like, I mean, the multiplier effect from agriculture is double what it is from pharma or tech, and it's the only option in town for a lot of parts of rural Ireland. So we have to make sure that we do everything possible, and I think everybody's engaging in a very positive manner to make sure that the derogation is retained.
I feel like the engagement is certainly there from the farming community, and they're all getting on board with the environmental targets. I think probably the challenge is to do within the time frame that the European Commission wants. And let's just call a spade a spade. They're not the most forgiving in terms of giving flexibility around timelines.
Well, I think that's where the visit of the officers from the European Commission is vital at the moment, and they're really getting out on our farms. Like when the Commissioner came last year, it was really just a fly-by-night visit, came in, met people and left. But like, they're getting an in-depth look of what's actually happening on farms and also what's happening in the agriculture catchment programme that gives us a better understanding of how actually the science is working and what measures and when they're implemented, the difference that they make. You know, so it's a really in-depth look, and they can see for themselves, like seeing is believing. So they can see the actual measures that have been taken out by farmers on the ground to improve the water quality, but also there's the better realisation by them that there is a time lag from when a measure is put in place to when that delivers. And even LawPro will admit that there's about a 4-year gap between when a measure is implemented and you see a chemical change in a water body, and then a further 2 years until there's a biological change. And it's the biological change that we're being that's being looked of us. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Yeah. And we need every sector, not just farming, to put their shoulder to the wheel to improve water quality.
Sean McNamara from the ICSA, your organisation has described the cuts to farmers' incomes this year as savage. And you've been calling on the government to do something. We may or may not have a new government in the next 4 to 5 months. What can they do to support farmers who have suffered, as you said, these savage cuts in farm income, when they are certainly restricted by, I suppose, the criteria of the Common Agricultural Policy and the funding that's coming from Europe?
We in ICSA is looking for a substantial increase in the suckler cow premium in €300. We're also looking for €35 premium for sheep. But all these schemes, they're no longer working. Like, you know what I mean? There's so much to do to get these schemes. We want to see a far simpler scheme that farmers can take a part in. Like, we see only about 15 or 20% of the suckler farmers taking part in the suckler scheme for the simple reason of all the things you have to go through. Like, we see it in our own sector, in the suckler sector, in the sheep sector. There's no young people to come into the sector for the simple reason is there's no viable living there anymore. And like, any young person that has a job is not going to come back to farm and not make a viable living. Simple reason, they can earn a lot more in a job. They're not going to get up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning to start calving cows or lambing ewes. They want an easier lifestyle. They want to finish their Friday evening at 6 o'clock or finish work at 4 o'clock in the evening. And that's the way the young people sees it. And unless we, as older farmers, and the government gets behind farmers and makes sure that farmers has a viable living and a fair price for the product, at least a fair price for the product, we have no business. Farmers going to be in dire straits in a very short time, and we're going to run into as I call it, a disaster. We're going to run into serious food security problems in the next couple of years.
Francie, I'll just come back to you. It's very easy today, on a gorgeous day like today in Ratheniska, to look around. People will see on news bulletins throughout the day, aren't the farmers having a great day out in the sunshine in Down County Laois today? Very short memories of 2 days ago when it nearly rained enough in a day for a month. And most of this year has been really, I suppose, just a downpour in many, many areas. Grass growth has been impacted. Then there's obviously the impact for tillage farmers as well. What sort of tangible impacts for people who maybe don't even come from a farming background? Forget about the sunshine today, which is beautiful and we're grateful for it here. But what about the impact of the weather on farming in this country over the last 9 months?
Oh, it's been massive. I mean, it's not just 9 months. It probably goes back to the autumn of 2022, directly after the plough match. Winter crops didn't get in. Fellas were forced to sow. Less profitable spring crops the following year. We had challenging weather. Basically, from then to now, and it's increased cost of production across all sectors at farm level, and I think that's culminated in a cash flow issue at farm this year that we haven't seen for a while. And while it's not endemic on all farms and not going to be there long term, some farms are going to be challenged long term about it. And I think as the year goes on, cuts to the supports coming through in October and the basic payment are going to be very, very stark in people's bank accounts when they get them and before the end of the year. And I can see it becoming an even bigger problem. And that's why we need our government to step up to the mark and support it. As I said earlier, the cost of doing business analysis that we've done, that lays it quite clear to the government where agriculture, the fat that's been taken out of the system over the last 5 or 6 years, and it hasn't been replaced by a pro rata increase in the product price that we're getting enough. All right, beef, dairy, sheep in particular, not going too bad this year, but all that margin's been eroded by an increase in the cost of production, and it's regulation as well. And we spoke about the nitrates directive earlier on, and in addition to all the points that Dennis made, we're working together as farm organisations with the ICMSA, with MOCRA, with DII and MII, and we launched a common document this week on it. But there's going to be a political impediment on whoever is Taoiseach leading this country, to go out and fight it as a put on the jersey and make the point to them out there that our grass-based agriculture livestock system here is unique. It gives us an advantage that other countries in Europe don't have. It's our car industry. It's our aircraft industry. And if the aircraft industry or the car industry was being challenged the same way in Germany and France, they get delivery on it. So we need our Taoiseach to step up to the plate here and back up what we're doing at farm level. There's a lot been done at farm level, but politically there's an impediment on the Taoiseach of the day to lead a national effort through government to ensure that we hold on to that derogation.
I might just go back to Sean on that. I mean, you're talking about the importance of farming and production agriculture in this country and how it's intrinsic to our economy. But you mentioned their food security, Sean. Like, do you think that there is maybe not a connection out there in the general public about the role that Irish farmers play in, you know, ensuring food security around the world, and famine is becoming more prevalent, particularly in third world countries, and what we do every day, you know, inside the farm gate?
Yeah, well, see, food security is going to become a big issue. The simple reason is, like, everyone, it doesn't matter whether you're from farming or what you're from, the farmer is producing the food and you're depending on the farmer 3 times a day to get your food. And, like, we have to look at in 4 or 5 years' time if farming is no longer viable. Like, at the moment, export markets is very good, serious markets out of Morocco. And the reason for that, part of the reason, but the other reason for that is that food in Morocco, Italy, and all the other foreign countries is scarce. And they're bringing boatloads of cattle out from Ireland out there to feed their population. Now, you have to remember, if we stop, like we've seen the suckler herd falling this year by 40,000, if this keeps continuing year in, year out, you're not going to have as much stock there. There won't be as much food there. And then food security at that stage will be a big issue. We'd have nothing to export. We'd have no export markets. There'd be a lot less jobs in this country. The department, everything, factories would have to close. Everything would happen. And like, it'd be serious in 4 or 5 years' time if it keeps going on the way it is. Like I says, we need a viable living. And that's what we're all fighting for in every farm organisation, is that farmers make a viable living.
Finally, I'll just go to Dennis before I let you go, as I know you have an appointment with Uachtar on Éireann. But Dennis, in terms of future viability, like there's a lot of kids here in the ploughing today and they're coming with mum and dad and they farm every day with mum and dad. Like, what's the future looking like for farmers in this country?
Look, I suppose at the present moment in time, we're stuck in an absolute perfect storm. We have a collapse in farm income, let it be whatever sector it is. Dairy farming that we represent is back 69%. You know, we have a huge issue with the amount of rules and regulations being enforced on farmers. Farmers are willing to do, but we need to make sure that we minimise those, but still deliver a result. We've a huge income volatility problem, and it's something that we've campaigned for about 10 years now with the government. The government had it included in their programme for government this time. They've one budget left to deliver that. I mean, what young person will look at a sector and say, right, I'm going to go in and my income is going to be here this year, here the next year, you know, up, down, up, down. We need an income volatility tool to take the rough with the smooth and take the bumps out of it. Because any young person that's looking at agriculture as an industry, they still have their mortgage to pay every month, they still have their shopping to do every week, they still have their ESB bill, their car loan. They need a stable income. Yeah. You know, that's what they need. And I mean, people are walking, you know, they're walking away from the industry. Yeah. If you look at the amount of people that are exiting farming this year, or planning on exiting farming, if you look at the CSO application rate, we have a 16% drop in people applying to do agricultural courses. We have a drop off on the number of people attending agricultural colleges. So, you know, if there was any other sector that saw that drop in income, if it was a tech or the pharma, it would be a national emergency to try and solve it. But, you know, the government seems to be sitting back and allowing this to happen and say, well, there'll always be farmers. But I think we need to get the message out there. There won't always be farmers unless there's a viable income and a steady income for farmers. True.
We have to leave it there, unfortunately. You have an appointment with, as I said, the Uachtar. I want to thank Francie Gorman from the IFA, Dennis Drennan from ICMSA and Sean McNamara from ICSA for joining us on the panel today. We're here at the Ploughing Championships and it is indeed a ploughing competition as well, in case anyone didn't know. They're out tilling the field, so we'll head on over to the Agriland team who are out and about at the moment.
May I wish all of you, particularly all those associated with agriculture in all its different ways, and all those who support with advice and expert assistance, I wish you every blessing and good fortune for the coming year as we all meet here again. And with that, it is my pleasure to declare the Ploughing 2024 open.
In financial terms, this show is worth something in the region of 50 million. And about 6.5 million of that goes to the taxman. So that's what it's worth here today. All you need today is plenty of water, sun cream and ice cream, and have a good day and enjoy the championship.
Right, Grant. Hi, I'm Hugh Harney here at Ploughing 2024. I'm joined here with Ruminant nutritionist David McGee at Kieran Millen. David, how's the year went so far for farmers?
Going good, Hugh. Like, it was a tough start. Like, people weren't too happy with milk price. Spring was tough. Like, but the mood is actually good now. Cows are actually milking well. Like, so in a lot of farms, cows are milking around 18 to 22 litres. Like, so I would be advising Hugh now. Grass is deteriorating a lot from a dry matter point of view, from sugars, from energy. So it's making sure that you bridge that energy gap. Like, so I'd be recommending to feed between 4 to 6 kilos of concentrate. Like, so with grass at 12 to 14% in dry marrow, is a cow physically going to eat that 100 to 120 kilos? The answer is no. So we need to bridge this gap. So we're going to do it with concentrates. Like, and also then now in the next few weeks, if weather does turn really bad, I definitely recommend to come out with your rocket fuels of bales that you're made to bridge that energy gap. Give it at the barriers there that they can eat a few kilos dry matter to keep milk up. Like, also then it's important, like what I'm seeing, a good milk price at 44 cent. Grass growth is poor, so people are kind of worrying. I'm seeing, are they going to have enough fodder? So good to actually feed. So farmers are going to get a 1-to-1 response. You feed a kilo, you get a litre response. Like, and actually when you work that out to an economical point of view, it actually is 70%. Like, so concentrate roughly at 32 to 33 cent, milk at 44 cent, it does actually to pay. And you're getting body condition score on cows. Yeah. So, like, we're thinking about drying off. We don't get this BCS, body condition score, right, it's going to have major implications in the subsequent lactation. So cows will actually be calving down too thin. They're going to produce less milk, lower protein, and be harder to get back in calf. Like, so we want.
Would you be recommending lads to start body condition scoring now?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and then would you recommend, if cows are too thin, would you say, right, we'll put them on a once a day milk and take out a few tin cows and put them on once a day milking, or what would you recommend?
Once a day, well, but what I'd actually say, just maybe up the concentrates by an extra few kilos. Yeah. And also maybe give them an extra few weeks for drying off. Like, half a body condition score is 25 kilos, like, and in the first week when you dry off, you're restricting intake, so you're lowering the energy density, so that cow actually isn't actually going to be getting enough energy, going to put no weight in. And also in the last few weeks, when the fetus is really putting pressure on, she's not going to be able to eat enough. So you want to be giving yourself a good 6 to 8 week period. So if you have to put on half a body condition score, that's 25 kilos. So you need to be doing them a kilo a day. Like, so yeah. You want to be looking, if they're thin, give them an extra few weeks. I'm also definitely recommend, so important, get your forage tested. The amount of farmers that don't actually get tested. What I'm seeing a big problem in South and the West, people are worrying, is there actually enough forage? And what I'm seeing is they're actually feeding, I have a lot of farmers even in the West feeding PK at the minute, just to bridge that gap. Like, and what they're actually seeing, they're saving in their grass, they're reducing the demand, and they're actually getting a response from litres wise and solids. Like,
yeah. And then going on to your autumn calvers then, so this time of the year, like, obviously a lot of autumn calving herds have started calving down. So what would you kind of recommend this time of the year, supplements wise, minerals wise, what's kind of best, for an after calver lick or even a pre-calver lick coming up now to the...
Yeah, then the big thing is minerals.
Yes.
So in my eyes, if you get the minerals wrong, you're in serious trouble. Like, because just say you want that cow to actually be calving down with no metabolic problems. When I say metabolic problems, we're talking about ketosis, displace abomasums, milk fever, the big one. Like, even if we subclinical milk fever, we're going to see it like in somatic cell count, metritis, retained clearance. So how we can prevent that is actually make sure that the minerals is right. Have we 20, 25 grams of added magnesium magnesium to help that cow draw that calcium out of her bones, which we need. Like, it's her high vitamin E and selenium, 1,000 vitamin E, 5 milligrams selenium, good anti-antioxidants to fight infections, give that cow immunity. And another big one is selenium to get that calf up and sucking straight away. Like, and another one that I see is iodine, to make sure that we've no weak calf syndrome, that we've 60 milligram, and they're 4 minerals that I'm saying. And another big one that farmers make a mistake. There's a lot of slurry on farms. They're putting it out hard, and potassium is a huge problem. So if we've potassium over like 1.8, 2%, we really need to be looking at it, because in simple terms, potassium locks up magnesium and doesn't allow the cow to draw off her bones. So she's more chance of milk fever, especially older cows. So I'd be recommending there to go in with maybe 100 grams of mag chloride if you have high potassium, or go in a bit of straw to dilute it. Like, so minerals is very important. And another big thing is, people think, oh, I can feed minerals in the last few weeks. You need to be feeding it for 6 weeks, like, to get it to work. Like,
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much for that, David.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Welcome back to the ploughing here at Ratheniska in the Agriland tent. We're in stand 289 on row 15. If you're around, or if you plan to come over the next few days, do pop into us. I'm joined now on our panel by David Cullen, the CEO of Opinions Research, and by Eamon Carroll, the Vice President of ICMSA. So over the past week, Agriland and ICMSA commissioned an independent research agency to carry out a survey, I suppose, of farmer sentiment on the future of farming and indeed on politics.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, some of the findings show that a massive 88% of farmers, or actual decision makers on the farm, that is, are concerned about the future viability of their farms. So 6 in every 10 respondents to the survey claim that their farm income has decreased in the past 5 years, with beef cattle rearing, such as sucklers, and tillage farmers recording the highest level of income decline in the past 5 years. Now, the survey also showed strong support for Fine Gael if there were to be a general election called tomorrow morning, with the majority stating that they would give their first preference vote to the Taoiseach's party. This was followed by support for independent candidates and then Independent Ireland, with Fianna Fáil and the Farmers' Alliance below that, and Sinn Féin and Aontú among the lower end of the support scale, according to that survey. So firstly, let me go to David Cullen, CEO of Opinions. With this survey, David, first of all, can you explain to us about who was surveyed? Yeah. As in, I suppose, who was represented? Sometimes people can think of surveys as very vague concepts, but ours was quite specific.
Yeah. Sure, thank you, Stella. I think this survey is particularly important and a very robust representation of where farmers are at the moment. We interviewed a total of 1,500 farmers, which makes it a very significant scale, robustness and so on. And from a margin of error point of view that's often quoted, you know, we're below 3% margin of error. So very statistically robust survey across all of the various farm enterprise types. We spoke to, I think, 168 in tillage, which is sometimes difficult to get, 68 that are involved in pig farming in some way, 127 in poultry, etc., etc. Lots in beef, lots in dairy, various enterprises within beef, whether it's suckler, whether it's finishing and so on. So we have a very, very good representative set of data that we can isolate different enterprise types and look at the various challenges that confront them. And I think it's interesting, Stella, you mentioned, and you know, in your introduction, 88% of farmers concerned about their future welfare. And absolutely too, you quoted that 7% of farms, particularly in beef and tillage, have had a difficult 5 years. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the more recent period, we see that it was dairy in the last 12 months that are reporting the biggest challenge to their income. And taking that further and looking ahead a little bit, we can look ahead 12 months, and a full half of farmers, 47%, say that they expect their future incomes in the next 12 months to deteriorate further. So they're very significant challenge. be that through the costs of materials, but also the cost of compliance and keeping up to date with regulation and so on. And farmers are very much left adrift when it comes to regulation because, virtually all, 96% of them feel that they're inadequately consulted when it comes to matters that affect their livelihoods. And imagine working in another industry where there is such an imposition of regulation that affects your livelihood that you feel that you've got very little say in it. And that makes people feel disenfranchised, and consequently some of the government parties you see getting a difficult time in the polling that you referenced as well, Stella. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
And Eamon Carroll, would you feel that this latest survey is reflective of the general tone in farming at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Stella. Just to follow on, I suppose, from what David said, absolutely. It is a snapshot in time, of where we are at the present moment in time. So, but it is fairly accurate, as accurate as can be, because we're hearing this every day, at farm level as well. As David has alluded to it, it's the rules and regulations is the biggest, obstacle that we see at the present moment in time, and that is having an effect, everywhere in terms of what farmers do. But the how would you call it? The profitability of the business that we're doing at the present moment in time is seriously challenging, given the amount of regulation that has been put upon us every day.
And do you think the government politicians are aware of this, Eamon? Or does it take the likes of something like this in black and white, a survey of actual farm decision makers, to show that this is a serious problem?
No, the survey itself will say that they seem to be out of touch with reality of what's going on at the moment in time. And, we're seeing that ourselves, that is the case. The politicians are saying that they're acutely aware of what's going on, yet they don't seem to be doing a whole lot about it. We were meeting the politicians regularly, and we hear what you say, but yet when it comes to putting policies in place, they choose the easy option in most cases.
Yeah. I might come back to you, David, then, talking about politicians. I suppose there was a general feeling there that the government is out of touch with the farming community and the challenges facing it at the moment. And it showed some interesting statistics in relation to support for politicians or political parties. Fine Gael coming out on top there with 27%, if you are to look at the findings without including, I suppose, the people who don't know or may not vote on the day. If you take those out, their I suppose, first preference support goes up to 33% for Fine Gael. Then coming individual independent candidates, and then the next on the ranking was for Independent Ireland.
Yep.
Are we surprised by that?
Well, I'm not, on the basis of a number of other findings within the study. So we've seen 90% of people feel Irish government are not in touch with the day-to-day issues confronting agriculture. So that puts them automatically on the back foot as a body, I suppose, as a popular government, if you like. So that's certainly the case, and we also see about 52% of people saying that there needs to be a stronger representation for farmers in rural Ireland, like they have in the Netherlands, taking that as a template. So for sure there is disaffection when it comes to politics in general. What appears to have happened with the farming public, as distinct from the rural population, right? So to draw an important distinction there, there's 127,000 farms in Ireland supporting, let's say, 150, 160,000 farmers, let's say rough numbers. There's about 1.8 million living in rural Ireland. That's a very different constituency. We're looking at a microcosm of rural Ireland, which are farming families.
Yeah.
And if we look at that, what has happened is that the political structures have shifted with those who are continuing to support the government parties are favouring Fine Gael quite clearly, and consequently, a third of the electorate, the farming electorate, are continuing to support Fine Gael.
Is
What
that
happens-
a traditional thing? Because people
Yes.
would have thought Fianna Fáil would be a strong farmer party.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, and we've seen this in previous studies as well, for older farmers, Fine Gael is a traditional option. So what we see, for instance, is 42% of those aged 65 plus are saying that they stake their support behind Fine Gael. That is much lower for Fianna Fáil. The challenge for the political parties is actually among those slightly younger farmers, those who are trying to make ends meet, to build a livelihood and to build a life around farming. And they're finding it more challenging. And as a consequence, what they're doing in defecting from the government parties is they're scattering a little. So they're scattering into either the independent option, so my local rural independent individual, or they're going to Independent Ireland as an entity. A large chunk of people, to 13% in total, say that they are going to give their first preference support to Farmers Alliance. And what's really important is that in that sentiment that we're capturing in the moment, we're capturing a mood of the moment, if you like, and it's showing that there is support there for Farmers Alliance in that mood. However, it's unlikely that Farmers Alliance or indeed Independent Ireland will have enough candidates run to actualise this intent or the positivity that there's felt towards them. It's protest for sure, but their candidate structure across the country is patchy. So even if I said on our survey, I'm going to support Farmers Alliance or Independent Ireland, there's a very real possibility that in my constituency I won't have that option. Mm-hmm. What happens then is probably people default to the known, tried and tested, and consequently the reality, if there was a poll tomorrow, an election tomorrow, Fianna Fáil probably wouldn't fare as bad as the 13% support that we see actually would suggest.
Yeah. Finally, I'll just go back to Eamon in one final issue from that survey, and that's succession. Over half of farmers had not identified a successor in this country. Eamon, is that going to be a problem?
It is going to be a serious problem going forward, and what seems to be the biggest, there's a number of factors, I suppose. You know, the income volatility is one factor. You know, you can't run a business on income volatility in the way that is. But the second thing is got to be the rules and the regulations. You know, the next generation, you know, they're eager, you know, to farm. They like agriculture. They were brought up in that way. But when it comes to all the paperwork that's involved, it's a case of, you know, somebody else does that, like, you know. But we're absolutely overburdened with rules and regulations, and that's what's driving them away at the present moment in time.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this afternoon's panel there on the opinions research on the future of farming and politics in this country. But we just touched there on succession and young people taking over the family farm. Certainly today at Ratheniska in Laois, if it's any indication of the sheer numbers of young people who have come along to see everything related to agriculture, it does look positive for the future, and one hopes that there is a viable future for them to take over in agriculture. So we're going to leave it there. I'm going to thank David Cullen from Opinions Research and also Eamon Carroll from the ICMSA for joining me. And now we're going back to the Agriland team out and about at the ploughing site here in Ratheniska.
Thanks, Stella.
Hello folks, we're here today at Ploughing 2024 and I'm joined by Board B's Joe Burke. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about how the beef markets have been this year?
Yeah, thanks Breffney. Great to be here, such sunny weather as well. Yeah, the beef markets have been strong. I suppose started off the year in slightly more sluggish position. Demand at the time wasn't quite as robust, I suppose, as it has ended up being throughout the kind of late summer and autumn months. But certainly there's a very positive momentum after coming into the trade. Numbers were quite strong earlier in the year and fell off then, partly as a result of the slow growing conditions, and I suppose grazing didn't really get off to a strong start until well into the summer months. So while we've seen in the last few weeks cattle numbers picking up and the weekly cattle kill reaching over 37,000, that hasn't dampened the trade or the demand. Certainly prices currently would be running up to 40 cents a kilo ahead of this time last year.
So, Joe, of course, we've seen over the past 4 consecutive weeks supply has been increasing, the supplies of cattle. But I suppose the demand must be out there. You know, we're seeing prices stay very steady, obviously.
Yeah, I suppose key export markets, Breffney, local production in Britain and across Europe has been down even on last year's levels. Like last year, production of beef across Europe fell by more than 3.5%. And there is no indication of any recovery again this year. So again, while inflationary pressures aren't as severe as they would have been for the last couple of years, we're still not seeing massive demand for the steak cuts or the higher priced cuts. But we are, I suppose, seeing a recovery in the demand for forequarter beef, for mince, for burgers, for manufacturing. That is one of the key factors really that has driven the beef trade over the last few months.
And of course cow price as well is staying fairly positive, and that's obviously a factor of that as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, similar to the prime cattle, cow prices have been, up to 50 cents a kilo ahead of this time last year. And again, while the number of cows being slaughtered has increased fairly strongly on even very high levels of last year, that hasn't met any resistance in terms of the demand for those animals.
And Joe, I suppose it's very hard to predict what's going to happen going into the future, especially in the beef trade. But is there any signals there to indicate what the market might do in even, we say, the near future?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of the factors closer to home are a little bit easier to predict. So if we look at the likely kind of supply profile over the next few months or even over the next year, we've seen very, very strong levels of movements of calves out of the country for the last 2 years. So far this year, over 280,000 animals have been sent out live in total, including calves and older cattle. So that would be, a really, I suppose, strong influence on the supply profile over the next year and over the next 2 years. So certainly, Breffney, our own local supplies look set to remain relatively tight for the foreseeable future. And similarly then, I suppose, on the supply side in the UK, they're forecasting tighter numbers. It's not just here in Ireland as well that we're seeing lighter carcass weights, that the numbers of kilos of beef that we have coming from the finished animals obviously is down. So all of those factors are leading to a relatively tight market, and demand, while it hasn't spurred on or it hasn't increased on other years, but actually just that tightness combined with what we would kind of describe as a fairly stable market, a fairly steady market, has led to a good situation anyway, certainly in the market for producers, for sellers.
And Joe, of course, that's the trend we're seeing across Europe where supplies are down.
Yeah, so cattle prices earlier in the year, the Irish cattle price on average was ahead of the European cattle price. That situation has reversed over the last few weeks, where even though the price here is steady and even it increased by a few cents over the course of over the last few weeks, in spite of that, the EU average male cattle price has pushed on a bit. It's probably running about 10 cents a kilo above of our average Irish male cattle prices. And in the UK, similarly, cattle prices are the strongest that they have been, throughout the year in that market. On average, our grade steers are running, over 70 cents a kilo ahead of the equivalent prices here.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks, Breffney.
Okay, so welcome back to the Agriland Pavilion. Good weather at this time of the year normally puts tillage farmers in great form, but is that really the case in 2024? So I have 3 men beside me, very well qualified to answer that question. Next to me is Bobby Miller, the chair of the Irish Grain Growers Group. Next to him is Kieran McAvoy, the chairman of the
IFA National Grain Committee, and furthest to my left is Gavin Carberry, the chair of the ICSA Tillage Committee. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time out to come visit us this afternoon. So, for me, I suppose the obvious question to ask is the harvest. How's it progressing, and is the weather making a difference? Bobby?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Harvest, in a lot of cases, is fairly well wrapped up. Obviously, pockets still left, later sown crops, in like so Wexford and Donegal, for example. They are still harvesting away because probably sown in May. But as a rule, most crops are harvested at this stage. Beans is probably the one that sticks out, though. That's only becoming ripe now, and probably could be 10 days or fortnight before even a lot of that is even harvested. So we've got through the harvest. It's fairly okay this year. Weather has been okay, fairly agreeable to get crops cut and straw wrapped up.
Grain prices that wouldn't be where they might want to be for yourselves?
No, absolutely not. They have basically collapsed in the last 3 to 4 weeks or a month, which is of no help to us. Compare that to 2022, grain prices are back nearly 40% this year, and costs have remained high. So in that regard, well, we got good weather, fairly good weather. At the end of the day, it's margin per hectare, and that will not be great again for the tillage sector.
Kieran, would it be accurate to say that it's been a case of positive progression as the harvest has come through? We started off with a very poor July in terms of both yields and straw quality. All of those parameters were in the very negative where winter crops are concerned, and yet when the spring harvest started, there was a degree of uplift there. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, to a degree, Richard, of course, yeah. And look, thanks for the invite. I suppose the harvest, to me, was a very mixed bag. It was a very regional harvest. And even within farms, no explanation from one field to the other in some cases of huge variations in yields. And I suppose winter barley was probably, the steadfast of a lot of tillage farms for the last number of years. And it was disappointing in most cases. Very poor yields, and straw yields on those crops were back as well. I suppose we would have always had a major fear that spring barley could have been a disaster, I suppose is the best way to put it. When you're talking about sowing in the end of April into May, and even as late as the beginning of June in some cases. And to be fair to those farmers who were wise or brave or whatnot, I don't know what you call it, I suppose it's the resilience of tillage farmers to stay doing what they do. And some of those crops have come out quite well. Not in all cases, but by and large, spring barley has been probably better than we would have expected. But with that said, unfortunately, the margin is, that's there might be nil or at best minimum on those crops because of the price. And I suppose, as regards the harvest and the progression of it, to me, it was a very frustrating stop-start harvest the whole way along. There was no particular run of weather. And look, we have to be very grateful for the weather we're getting in the last few days, and they're giving it into it. The people will get finished and will get the straw tidied up and baled, not like this time last year. I think this time last year we were still beating winter barley straw with a rake. And look at, out of sight, out of mind sometimes is a good help too for tillage farmers. And I think this few days are, there's pockets of barley still to be cut, even in this area, and particularly in the southeast and in the northeast as well. Pockets of barley not even ripe yet, but by and large, I suppose the bulk of the harvest is done, and it has been, quality has been quite good.
Excellent. So, Gavin, the minister, reflecting back to that period in June and July, the minister, and I'm using my own words here, stepped on a bit of a landmine when he changed the criteria linked to the straw incorporation measure, chopping versus baling. Do we have any senses yet as to how much of this year's straw actually has been baled?
Well,
and did we end up with a decent enough compromise where the minister's concerned?
Thanks very much, Richard, for having me on. I'm based in North Leinster, up in County Louth. We normally have a good market for straw, Cavan, Monaghan, Ulster counties. Straw yield is well down this year compared to other years, along with the grain yield. a lot of the harvest up in our neck of the woods is still not complete. We have probably approximately 30% of spring oats to cut, maybe the same in spring barley. As our colleagues here referred to, a lot of stuff was late sowed this year, and that reflected too in the straw. Now, the straw incorporation, when the minister, as you said, stepped in the landmine, to put it mildly, our phone never stopped. Farmers were worried. When they put the crop in the ground and they filled in their best application, they ticked the box to do the straw incorporation, and 90% of them had that money accounted for, before it came, and all of a sudden there was the potential of it being, eroded. So we welcome what the minister done. We think it was a great compromise, and for a further perspective, a lot of the straw that was being shopped anyhow was going to be oaten straw, oilseed rape straw. So for a further perspective, it wouldn't make that big a difference, but it would help. Our main concern in relation to straw would be the imports coming in from the UK, and we have the threat of blackgrass and all these other noxious weeds that we can't control, and maybe chemical resistant wild oats and something like that, and that's all I have our hands, and that could devastate the tillage industry going forward. Now, we see this year the area under tillage is actually reducing. Food Vision 2030, the minister went with that, and that was actually to increase the area under tillage to 400,000 hectares from approximately 300,000 where we are today. But unfortunately, it's backwards we're going at the minute, and that's all due to the cost of growing the crop and the return the farmers get.
Yeah. The minister that I'm aware of hasn't officially responded to the Tillage Vision report as yet. Bobby, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct from my understanding anyway. I suppose we're all waiting for the budget to see will there be a direct response to what was a lot of hours put in to compile that report. So I suppose the first opportunity that the minister is going to have to respond to that is the budget, upcoming budget. And he did commit earlier in the year to 30 million for the tillage sector. That's the bare minimum ask for the sector. We need the request from the Vision report was 60 million. The minister hasn't even guaranteed that 30 million yet, so we expect that to be the number one priority in this upcoming budget. But we need many changes and for the tillage sector as regards policy to recognise native Irish grain and pulses for what they are, a low carbon grain.
And Kieran, from an IFA perspective, are you of the view that there will be significant outcomings from the budget where tillage is concerned?
We're very hopeful, but there's nothing flagged yet, Richard, to be honest with you. The Minister, to be fair, did give the commitment to the €40 an acre payment for this harvest. When that comes, I don't know, but he did kind of commit to that and has still committed to it. As you're aware, as Bobby has said, the Food Vision report is there. A lot of expertise, a lot of people put a lot of time into that report. And we wouldn't like to see it as a quango. We'd like to see that this is a real delivery. But I suppose in IFA what we have felt is that there's a lot of short-term and long-term ambition in the Food Vision group. But what we feel is we need immediate action. Okay, we have had 3 huge disadvantages to the tillage sector over the last couple of years, namely the Ukrainian war causing volatility on input prices and grain prices. We've had a nitrates derogation, nothing to do with tillage farming, but it has caused a huge upset in the land rental market. And we also have had probably of the harvest of 2023, well, it's a year ago, the scars of that are still there, Richard. And a lot of those holes and financial holes haven't been filled yet. And you know, the tillage sector is at a real crisis point, and it's not to cry wolf. We want to be positive. And what we have said is that we put a policy to government looking for €100 a hectare of a payment to stabilise the tillage sector for the next 5 years. And hopefully within 5 years, we are going to be where we are going to be with nitrates. We're going to be where we are. Hopefully there'll be peace in the Ukraine again and things settle down and we get to normal trade and inputs come back. So while we think, you know, the Food Vision is very, very important that is completely implemented, but I think our ask now is straight away, to put some bit of confidence back into tillage farmers that they can stand up and go back into the fields again and do business. And that's what our ask is.
So that's €100 per year per
acre.
hectare for the next 5
No, per acre.
Per acre. Apologies.
Yeah. There's no point in talking about, it's easy to say that you're going to have a target of 400,000 or 400,000. The first thing we have to do is stop the slip and people getting out. Because when you lose those people and their expertise, they're not going back.
Yeah.
If you get out of tillage, you're not going back.
No, I hear what you're saying.
And a lot of people are just hanging in, and that's not to be negative about the industry. And I mean, a lot of this money that we were looking for was already in the tillage sector, Richard, and it has been taken away by draconian measures in CAP.
Yes, agreed.
So,
yeah. Can I maybe just turn to yourself, Gavin? Do you feel that there's more could be done by other sectors within agriculture to recognise the value of tillage? For example, could there be some form of premium price mechanism put in place
to
incentivise the tillage sector, whether that be through dairy, beef, pig? Is there scope to allow that to happen, do you think?
Well, there's scope for a lot of maybe recycling of nutrients. There a lot of maybe, instead of the derogation and stuff, maybe some of this slurry and farmyard manure could end up in tillage farms, and maybe some mechanism for that to be enabled.
Yeah.
We'd also like to see in ICSA the €250 a hectare for 5 years to give farmers security and commitment. There's a lot of them going to be putting crops in the ground probably within the next week, 10 days when the barley will be starting. Them guys need to know, they're going to get a viable income out of it. And in all fairness, the days of farmers just breaking even, them days should be gone. Farmers have to make a living as well, the families to support. The rural economy is very strong. And we want to see energetic young people coming into the sector. And the only way they're going to come into the sector with all the other pulls out of the sector for them is income and a security of income. So that's why we're calling on the Minister, to ensure they have at least the 250 a hectare for the next 5 years. And so tillage farmers can even compete in the rental market for land. We'd also like to see maybe there's the GLAS there, there's the acre scheme there at the minute, and there's low input pasture, and all our farmers are getting paid for that, and perhaps that could be used in the tillage, but it should be looked at.
Well, maybe come back to Bobby then and pick up on one or a couple of those points. In the past, when I've spoken to you, you were very keen for farmers, Irish grain farmers, Irish tillage farmers, to get that premium price for grain, recognising the low carbon footprint of the grain that's produced on this in this country. I mean, how can that be rolled out in a very practical way for farmers, tillage farmers here?
Yeah, there's no point in asking the livestock sector to start using native Irish grain if they're not rewarded for using. So this is where government policy comes in, and this is where the dairy industry and the meat industry can play their part. They're already giving sustainability payments to dairy farmers, and you have in the meat industry you have quality assurance payments. We need to incentivise the use of native Irish grain, and that comes from government policy and the rest of the other industries to recognise native Irish grain. Climate change is constantly being spoken about now, and we have the ideal product here in Ireland.
Yeah.
What we also need to do, though, Richard, is add value to what we grow. 75-80% of our grains goes directly to feed mills. We need to invest in primary processing, where we add value to the grain and pulses first, and then have the byproduct available for the feed industry. So we need to get away from just growing grain to provide feed, because that we are competing with the South Americas, Mercosur countries, Indonesia, Malaysia. That's our competition, and we have to move away from that being our competition if you have to have a future for this sector.
Okay. You touched on this principle of added value. I suppose the poster crop for, if I can use that term, for adding value in this country is malting barley. Kieran, is there scope to increase the tonnages of malting barley that we're producing here.
Well,
significantly beyond where we are at the moment.
I suppose there's definitely room for increase, and I suppose over the last 6 or 7 years there has been a huge increase in the amount of malt that is assembled and produced in Ireland, and there's been big investment in facilities, particularly here very close to here in Athy through Bournemouth. They've spent a lot of money in the plant down there, and I know they have plans to invest more as it goes forward. We would envisage that there's probably somewhere around 250,000 tonnes of grain going into the malting industry now, which represents a large percentage of the crop. We probably would see that could go to 300,000 quite quickly. And look at, we have a relationship with Bournemouth. We try and work with them to negotiate and improve the crop. And it can be a frustrated relationship sometimes, but we're all on the one side to try and get as much barley as possible into the malting process and get a premium for that.
Great stuff. Guys, 20 minutes have flown by. I can't believe our conversation. I have to draw it to a close. Thank you all so much for coming in today. And I get a sense that Tillage can look forward to a reasonably confident and upbeat future. Thank you all.
Thanks very much,
Richard.
Thank you.
Richard.
Well done. Thank you.
I'm here with Karen Moynihan, social media content creator. Karen, when you just started putting stuff up on social media, was it something that just naturally flowed, or how did you get into it?
I've been asked this question a lot and I still don't really know how to answer it. It started during COVID. My sisters were kind of encouraging me to join up to TikTok and I was a bit reluctant. Eventually I did, and then I came across Farm Talk while I was there and I was like, well, I have cows, so and I just started putting up a few videos of them and saw that people kind of enjoyed what I was doing, so I said, why not do a few more?
And how did the following grow? Was it always there from the start, or did you have to keep kind of posting?
I think regular